Good Friday. It started with Jesus praying in a garden with a group of friends, and then it ended with Jesus hanging on a cross in front of the entire world. And there was a lot that happened between those pivotal moments of the garden and the cross. In those moments, Jesus was betrayed by one friend, denied 3 times by another friend, and then abandoned by everyone. He was seized by a mob, then secretly forced through a kangaroo court, sentenced unjustly, shamed publicly, and then he was ridiculed, beaten, and crucified. And that's what we call Good Friday. I don't know how your Friday was. I don't know if you've had a bad Friday before, but that was most definitely a bad Friday. But it's a Friday to us that has become very good. And what I like about this story is the role that Jesus plays in the story. A man who's talked a lot, a man who has spoken to a lot of crowds, who has taught publicly, who has confronted oppressors, a man who has confronted religious leaders. In these moments, he doesn't talk very much, and he doesn't spend a lot of time defending himself either, but he does have a one-on-one conversation with one person in particular. And in the story we're getting ready to read, there's actually 3 parts of this conversation. There's Jesus, but then there's also the part of the conversation where Jesus steps out of the crowd and begins to talk to a powerful Roman governor named Pilate. But in this story also, we see a conversation between Pilate and a crowd of people trying to have Jesus murdered. And what I want to do is I want to read that story today. I want to read that story, and I'm going to read some words from Pilate, I'm going to read some words from Jesus, and we're also going to read some words from the crowd. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these words on the screen so that you can follow along. But I would love for you to play the crowd, being that you are a crowd. You are perfectly prepared to do that, okay? And so the words that appear in yellow, those are the words that you're going to read. Now, mind you, this crowd is a crowd that is angry. This crowd is there early in the day, ready to see a man crucified and sentenced to death. So when you read those words, read it like they mean it. The story starts this way. It says this: Jesus' trial ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man?" "Then take him away. Judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked him. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for a trial. Why? What have you done?" I find Pilate's words interesting here, by the way, because it appears that Pilate can't find a reason that he's here. It's almost as if Pilate thinks this man is innocent. Jesus goes on to answer Pilate and says this: "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I am a king. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. "Don't you realize that I have the power to either release you or to crucify you?" Then Jesus said, "You would have no power over me at all unless it were given to you from above. So the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." Now Jesus is pointing his finger at you guys. Pilate went out again to the people and told them, "He's not guilty of any crime." You see that? Pilate knows the truth. Pilate met the truth. He's looked at the truth, and he sees that the truth has committed no crime. Now, it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus?" Pilate knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Pilate knows who's guilty here, and it's not Jesus. It's the crowd. Just then, As Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message. "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night." Even Pilate's wife knows that the guy's innocent. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked the crowd again, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" Pilate responded, "Then what shall I do with Jesus?" Crucify. What? Crucify your king? Can you imagine those words coming from the people of God's mouth? This is a chosen people, a people selected by God himself, who had followed him for centuries, saying these words, "We have no king but Caesar." Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." This little Jesus and me conversation that Pilate has with Jesus and that Pilate has with the crowd, there's a lot of interesting questions that are asked, but the most interesting question to me is a question that Pilate asked the crowd. Knowing the situation that he was in, knowing that an innocent man stood before him, knowing that the crowd just asked for a notorious thief to be released, Pilate asked this question: "What shall I do with Jesus?" And that's a question that I believe every single one of us needs to be able to ask ourselves and answer this Good Friday. You see, for Pilate, he was really asking that question: what do you want me to do with Jesus? He's innocent. What do you want me to do? What shall I do with Jesus? And Pilate knew there were only two answers that could be given. One was to crucify Jesus, or two was to be crucified himself. He knew there was no middle ground there. I either got to crucify this innocent man, or this crowd is going to cause such a problem for me that Caesar is going to come and crucify me. And so he's trying to figure out, what do I do? Do I crucify an innocent man, or do I give my life up as well? Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, yet he was more interested in saving himself than putting his life on the line for someone who was innocent. He was more interested in saving himself than standing up for truth, standing for innocence, standing for justice. And here's the funny reality of this story is that no matter what Pilate would have chosen, Jesus is headed for the cross anyway. You know that, right? Like, Pilate did not have the power to save Jesus from the cross. Jesus was going to the cross. Saving Jesus was not an option. Jesus was going to be crucified that day. But Pilate, his best option was not to necessarily just crucify a man, but his best option was standing up for truth, possibly allowing for himself to be crucified as well. What shall I do with Jesus? Do I crucify him, or do I allow myself to be crucified with him? I think that second one is the better option of the two. And it's actually the paradox of the story of this day that we call Good Friday. You see, Good Friday is called Good Friday because of the life that comes from the cross, not just the death. You see, the one who was crucified is the one who found life. The one who goes to the cross is the one who finds life. The ones who are crucified on Friday are the ones who experience life on Resurrection Sunday. And I think that's why Jesus told his disciples months earlier that if you are going to follow me, you must take up your cross daily and follow me. Jesus gave them not an invitation to death, but what Jesus was giving to them was an invitation to the life that comes after the cross. He says the one who finds life is the one who goes through the cross, not around the cross. And I think that's what a lot of us try to do. That's a lot of what Pilate was trying to do here as well. There was the Apostle Paul. He knew where life was found, and he wrote this. He says, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me." The paradox of Good Friday is that despite all the appearances, the cross doesn't lead to death. The cross leads to life. And Pilate missed it. He missed that in the conversation that he was having with Jesus. His assumption is that the cross had the last word. And so he asked the crowd, and I think it's a question that maybe he should have pondered a little bit longer. What shall I do with Jesus? And he made up his decision when he brought out a bowl of water to the crowd to answer their question of what shall I do with Jesus? What's my responsibility to this man named Jesus who seems to be innocent? And what he does is he brings a bowl of water out to the crowd, and he does something that would have been familiar to a Jewish audience. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, it talks about doing this to proclaim innocence. And so Pilate, he brings this bowl of water and he begins to wash his hands in front of the crowd. And it really served three messages to the crowd. The first message was him saying, I'm washing my hands because I believe that this man is innocent. I find no crime in him. He's clean of the crimes that you're putting against him. He's innocent. And that message was correct. That message was true. This man was innocent. And as he was washing his hands, he also sent them a second message. That man may be innocent, but you are not innocent. You are the reason that he is here at this moment. His death is your responsibility. And that message also was true. Not just to the crowd that yelled, "Crucify him" then, but also to the crowd that yelled, "Crucify him" today. Every single one of us, with our actions and by our deeds and by our lack of faith in God, we have put Jesus on the cross. Through our sin, we have put him on the cross, and we bear responsibility for that. Pilate was right about that. There's a third message Pilate was giving as he washed his hands in front of the crowd. Jesus is innocent, you are guilty, and I wash my hands, and I'm innocent too. That message was downright wrong. Because Pilate, he had two options with what shall I do with Jesus? Shall I crucify him, or shall I be crucified with him? And through self-preservation, he went around the cross, making himself just as guilty as the crowd. And so he called his army together to take this man away to be crucified. The story goes on to say, the soldiers led him away inside the palace, and they called together the whole battalion. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. And they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him, and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. And they led him out to be crucified.